So this film sort of follows this journey of these three different women, and I'm looking at it as like this theme around live your life. And so I'm just curious, is this, what prompted you to make the film? And then is it in any way autobiographical?
I wanted to portray women in a way that's not usually portrayed. I find like in a lot of rom-coms, as much as women would go through a journey, they would ultimately end up getting the man. Right. And most times it's centered around that. So the friendship is centered around that. In the end, everybody wants to get it to the altar. And I thought, what if we all have that one friend who constantly makes bad choices when it comes to guys. We're like, oh my God, have we not been through this a couple of months ago? So I wanted to create a friendship story that would show women as friends how we usually interact with each other, how we speak to each other, but more so the things we're going through as women is not isolated. There is this constant want or need to be attached to a man or to be wanted or loved. Essentially, we all want to be loved at the end of the day. But how far are we willing to push that to get what we deem our version of love? Is getting married the ultimate goal, representation of love? And a lot of women are dealing with that at the moment. Well, generally. And so it's really nice to actually bring it out and actually call our friends out on that, because that's what we do in real life. That's the Kat's character. The Lou's character, there's also nothing wrong with a woman being married, having kids, and having a perfect life, but just missing something. Right. And it's not like, I want a divorce or I want to try a new thing. It's like, how do I make these little tweaks in my life or my relationship that can help me redirect this boat, because I am in love and I am with this person. And then the Knox character, which is played by the fabulous Tumi Morake, that is great. That is like life right now. Everybody's doing the most to be on social media and compromising who they are. And actually compromising who they are, and to what extent are we willing to go to it so to get what we want? And is the thing we want in line with our career, or is it just a choice we're making now because we need fame, we want to revive ourselves, we want to do? So there's all these emotions going on as women and pressure that society puts on us to get married at a certain age, to have these goals clearly lined out, and to have this perfect marriage that you just keep quiet in all the time. No, it's not autobiographical, but I do find elements of myself in when I wrote these characters. So I'm in a 20-year relationship, not married, but I always find we're always having to tweak. Every now and then we have to sit down and have some real conversations of things that we've let slide or things that are just not working anymore. And I found not a lot of relationships have the luxury of having that kind of openness and to be able to navigate those. The first time a woman says, I think I'm unhappy, it's like disaster, divorce. And that's not usually the way to go. The Kat's character, I guess, is a career choice. To what extent are you going to do the things you need to do for your career, or suppress who you are in order to keep some sort of love? And I know a few people like that. So
I mean, I think that's the great part of this film. I mean, it is a chick flick, but it's so much more than that. And you touched on that. You can see yourself in each one of these characters, or one of these characters, or in the situation, which I think makes it so much more endearing. And that's such a big part of filmmaking and creating these characters, is that you want people to see themselves in them. And I think that you have done an amazing job, and then developing these characters beyond just sort of a superficial.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really like the that she doesn't look outside of her marriage to kind of fulfill what she feels she needs. She's, like you said, she's kind of committed to this marriage, and it's like, okay, what can I do to tweak it? And I think that's a great message, that there's always, people always go for the easy out,
Yeah.
and so she's thinking, okay, so what can I do, because I want my family and my
And I
kids.
think the audience's mind would go there initially.
Yes,
Their
absolutely. That's
first
where mine
thought
went.
would be like,
Yeah.
oh, I
He's
get,
gonna
oh,
go.
she's probably
Yeah.
going to have an affair.
Yeah.
Here you go, marriage.
Exactly. Because we're so trained to see that, right? We see that in the people that we're around, and we see that in films. So
Yeah.
that's what was really refreshing about this as well, is that she was looking not to do that. She was looking to see what she could do within her marriage.
Yeah, and I think that when we see films like this, you're right. It's this sort of like formula, and with rom-coms and all these, it always, Alice and I are always talking about making movies called After the Credits, because after the rom-com it all wraps up really beautifully, but really what actually happens. And I just love the way these characters are developed, and sort of asking questions about what's best for you, and what is your truth, and we're just really excited to have it at RoxFilm.
Thank you.
I'm curious as to how, I saw a little bit about how the film was received in South Africa. What was that like?
I think everyone also had this idea that it was going to be this rom-com. Okay, girl gets down, best friends. We'll get her to the altar on time. And so it was kind of 50-50, because we had an audience who thought, oh, should I really go back to the cinema for the first time since COVID to see this type of film?
Mhm.
And then we had an audience going, oh, actually, I think there might be something else to this film. And throughout our marketing campaign, we tried to maintain the friendship, because it is a story about friendship
Right.
at the end. But audiences have been so trained that when we see women on the front, when we see a woman-led film, it's going to be very rom-com. So the audiences that did make it to the cinema actually were quite surprised, and our feedback went really well. So our word-of-mouth campaign was actually really good.
Yeah, I saw some of the red carpet that just was like fabulous, and people feeling really joyful and happy. And so what is it that you felt like after that, and the other screenings that you've done, what has been your experience with people coming out of the film?
They loved it. I mean, most times I always ask people, you don't have to speak the truth. I mean, because it's me. So I would generally hang out. I just speak as a normal person. I did stalk a few audience members as they got out of like public screenings. And everybody was like, oh my God, I did not expect this. People did not expect to see Africa in the way that we had showed them. It wasn't bleeding heart, sad humans that had to deal with African problems. It was just, and there were a lot of groups of girls that we had in our audience, the exact trio that would go on a bestie vacay together. So our audience was largely groups of women in their 30s. And then we had we had teens going to the film. And I suppose there was the nostalgia to the actresses. They hadn't seen them for a while on a big screen. And Knox's character just took off like you never believe.
She played it very well. I mean, but it was also, I mean, it was really a great friendship movie too, because, like you were saying about any kind of relationship, you do have to tweak, and you do have to talk, and you do have friction, and you realize at the end that this is the best thing that I have, right? And that those things don't matter. So that was also nice to see, because that could have gone a different way too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, friendships are really difficult. I had a 15-year friendship that just ended one day because she was mad at me, and I was like so confused about this. And I said to my partner, so there's no conversation, like when do we get to call each other out on this? Or are we allowed to? And it turns out the friendship did break up because of calling each other out on it. And so, and then when other people, and the actresses started reading the script and crew got on board when we were shooting, almost everybody had a story about a friend who did not like getting called out. So I think the mirroring of everyday life did come through in that way.
Right. I mean, I think, and that's true. It's not just about the marriage relationships between men and women, but really women's relationships. And I think you're right. You know, we've all had that, and sort of like what happened to that relationship, and that hurts. It hurts on you know, on all sorts of levels. So it's great that you know, as audience members, you can explore all of those things as you're watching this film.
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation come up about how women are tuned to putting each other down. We love each other and we support each other, but only to a certain extent. And then it becomes easier to play us up against each other. And we had a lot of feedback about, you know, just reinforcing how we can do this together. We don't need to be played up against each other, whether it's good looks or, you know, all the frivolous things that it becomes easy to pin us up against each other.
Right, because we are stronger together than we are than people who try to separate us, right? And I think that's really important. Your film did really well at the box office, I hear, like over or just under John Wick and Shazam when it had come out.
Yeah, we released in the top 5, which was great.
Yeah.
I think, you know, cinema is so tricky in our territory at the moment because there is this influx of studio films. And I'm sure that's the story worldwide. And we have limited, and what it does is gives you limited time on screen. So in the period that we had released, there was John Wick, there was Mario Brothers, there was, you know, there was just a whole Shazam, Scream, and they were just coming out week after week after week. So I was lucky enough to have stood with them for at least 6 weeks.
Wow.
It's quite a push, but we had a great support structure from all the exhibitors in our country. But I do understand that they're really stuck right now because if Guardians of the Galaxy is out and you're not distributing it, or you choose a local film, it's quite, I guess it's a business at the end of the day. The territory is very difficult in the sense that it's easier to pick an American studio product over a local product. Unlike Asian markets and Indian markets where it's the local products that actually, you know, brought everybody back into the cinemas post-COVID. And our side,
interesting.
we found it quite the opposite. It was the international films that were bringing people back. 80% of our audience, it was the first time they were back in the cinema since COVID.
Wow.
So that was a bit crazy.
Well, that's a lot of pressure.
That's like a lot of pressure. If anything, like if this just opened the door for other filmmakers to say, let me just take a chance, it's fine. Let me try different ideas. Let me try a limited 2-week run. Let me try a limited 4-week or 6-week run, and, you know, just plan it differently so that we have great facilities here, and we'll be ashamed to see that exhibition not work because of streaming influx. And streaming is fantastic. We love them. It's the way for us to connect worldwide.
Right.
But there is that cinematic experience that is still awaits us.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think that, you know, movies are made to be seen in theaters with other people to feel that reaction. So, you know, we are really excited to be able to come back into the theater as well and to bring films that we know that audiences will come in to see. So I'm just curious, did you do a festival circuit in Africa, or is it mostly putting it up for like four-walling it or having a run? Is that mostly the way it's done there?
So in July is our big festival here, the Durban Film Festival.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's quite way past our time, and the main objective is to look for films that haven't been released. Everybody wants,
Yeah.
either
Everyone
that
wants
territory
something
or
new.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that city. They want to have the first. So we didn't really have a festival plan. It just kind of fell in our lap. We decided, hey, why not? The film's ready. Let's see if we should try a festival route. And we did really well, especially in the States. We did great in Sydney, Melbourne, and New Zealand. They did a few screenings there. It turned out it was great. And we just, we got one in Madrid later this year. So I think audiences are either gravitating towards the lightness of the film, or that something different can be made in Africa, something light
Right.
and fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's really exciting about it. And it's true. It's sort of like, we're an international festival, so we have all different films from all over, but that's what I really love about this film too. It's like it washes away those stereotypes. It's a film that is universal, global, that anyone can connect with, but yet it's an African film with all its incredible, colorful beauty, and beautiful scenery, and just this sort of like, Black love in a sense, whether it's women, men, whatever. And so I think that it's part of what we really try to do with our festival, is to sort of like, flip the narrative, flip the switch, and bring in films that do exactly what your film is doing for places.
And the cross culture for South Africa,
Yes.
that's our reality in terms of races, cultures. And so having to merge the Indian culture, even if it's just for like a second or two, just those small little bits, shows how blended we are. We're quite blended as a society. And I was fortunate enough to be able to bring different characters from different races onto screen.
Now, was it hard to cast the movie?
No, it was quite easy. So Kat and Knox, I have worked with before, and I've written roles for them. So this was when I'd called them up and said, hey, I'm making a movie. Can I write you guys something? It was a no-brainer. I was like, no, don't you want to hear what it's about? They're like, no, we're in. We'll see you when the script is ready. Cool. Lou was a bit tricky. We had to look for her, but also Minnie was fantastic when she joined the team.
Yes.
I think a lot of people were excited to make the film. And a lot of the actors that came on board, I had worked with previously or had heard about an experience with us, and we're really keen to jump. It was really not difficult. We did have to do a couple of cheats because the casting in Zanzibar wasn't Zanzibar as I suppose there aren't many actors in Zanzibar as opposed to the mainland, which is Tanzania. And even there, the Tanzanian actors are out of the country, or so we did have struggle on that end. But from the South African casting process was actually quite fun. I was surprised the process was actually fun. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, so that was crazy.
Yeah.
I know that brings all its own other challenges. Can you just talk a little bit about, because I think, people might not understand that sort of when you were talking about crossing cultures and being sort of like multicultural in a sense that's different, that the film, takes on and is different in other places. I'm not sure that everyone sort of understands that,
Yeah.
In the, US perspective of that.
Yeah. So South Africa is this wonderful blend of many cultures. We've got African culture, and within that, we've got its strong Zulu culture or a Xhosa culture or a Tswana culture. And then we've got a very big Indian diaspora, the second outside of India. So if anything goes wrong, we will carry on from here. Well, although I think the States might be growing at a faster rate.
Yeah, maybe.
So our Indian diaspora is quite big. And, you know, we've got a big colored community on our side. It's called a colored community, which is any kind of mixed race community. And then we have a white Afrikaans, Dutch, and a white English speaking community. So it's quite difficult to incorporate everybody, and we have 11 languages to deal with. So English is kind of the biggest language and the easiest. But it was lovely to be able to bring everybody to screen. I have a deep-rooted Indian culture that I myself have never been able to experience, because it's also culture versus religion.
Right.
You know, so it's lovely to incorporate these elements, and I try to blend them in every film that I do. So bringing a little bit of that, bringing the African family that's not rooted in a hut or a, you know, a perception that people have of what Africa is about, and just making them 3 everyday girls. Merging them so that the friendship is never about color, it's never about culture, it's just about 3 girls getting on. And I think that's quite a big shift compared to maybe 20 years ago, where culture or race would have played quite a big role, specifically to our country.
That is great, because I mean, I think that is true here as well too. It's about when your friends are your friends, and that was so lovely about that. But I appreciate that that description of that, because I think it's here. You know, I think we understand that, and we understand the African continent, and you know, the many different cultures that are there. But to hear you just talk about like putting the film together and making sure that that everyone was represented, I think is really incredible. So part of that answer too is, I guess, what you want people to take away from this film when they walk out after, you know, being so joyous and giggly.
My biggest thing would be I would ask if every woman could be unapologetically themselves. That would be my first thing. To be unapologetically yourself, to change your mind all the time. It's okay. There is no rule on how many, the time that I need to say yes, or why do I change my mind all the time? That is absolutely normal. And if you do, nothing's ever a mistake. There are just choices that we make, and we can recorrect our course at any time. So if everybody could take that away and understand and value your friendships and kick the toxic people out when the time's right.
Yeah, that's good advice. So what is next for you, Bianca?
Oh, I kind of, there's been talk about a second one. So we've been busy talking about what that storyline would be, and where the next honeymoon would be. And what is that honeymoon? So there have been talks about that. And I'm looking forward to some sleep next month. It turns out that making a movie is not the end of it. The release is just as exhausting as the production and post-production. And we're a small independent company, so I think it just makes it a bit harder. But yeah, I am in development for a sequel and looking for some sleep.
That's great.
That is great. We can't wait.
I do have a development lab that I'm launching. I had been working on for a few years. So we're launching that at the Durban Film Festival this year, and will be interesting to see how many future filmmakers we can round out.
Wow, that's incredible. So are you focusing on future filmmakers in general, or are you focusing on women filmmakers? Is there something specific that you might be focusing on with this development lab?
I'm doing this in relation to who is the new South African audience, and the generation of filmmakers that are going to tell that story. Because I would say everybody up until their 30s everyone below their 30s is a different audience. They're growing up in a
Mhm.
different time. They don't have the same issues we had as South Africa. And so where is that audience and where are the filmmakers for that audience?
And what is the
hopefully
stories they're going to tell?
Yeah, and what is that? What are those stories? Because it's definitely not the stories I'm going to continue telling, because I don't see the world the way they do, and I
Mhm.
haven't grown. I've grown up in a world that had different problems, and so I'm really excited to see where do I find those. It's seven. It's a program for 7 filmmakers, and I'm really excited to find them. And we've got a great development team together, and I hope we can come up with some fabulous stories of who this new generation is going to be.
Wow, that is
I
really
would love
exciting.
I would love for it to be female focused, but I also don't want to exclude any
Right.
stories just because it's a male telling it. It will be really interesting to see how the new male creators see women in their films.
I think that's amazing. I think that is so incredible to give back like that, because it's true. That next generation is really important, to be supporting them, to getting their stories. We do screenings of youth films, and support youth filmmakers because they are the next generation. And you're absolutely right. Their stories are completely different and we can't lose them. Just like we can't lose the stories of the elders. And we need to film them and get their stories, just so that there's this constant conversation about, who we are and where we live. So congratulations with that.
Thank you. I mean, we have a really good movement here. It's called the Independent Black Filmmakers Forum. I'm one of the board members on it. And a part of our key strategy for the country is to support the value chain of Black filmmakers.
Wow.
So it's not only about the writer or the director being Black. We push for almost 90% African. And when I say non-whites, it's everyone that's actually non-white. It doesn't matter what race you are, as long as you're not white. So, we really push for that value chain across the filmmaking. So whether it's in services or apart from being an actual crew member. And I think that as much as we're doing that to to rectify a course or to redirect a course, what's interesting is that the 20-year-old filmmaker does not see race the same way. And, they interact with their friends in different ways. And so I'm really excited to see how we merge those two moving forward. So maybe the next time we have something here, you ladies can come through.
Okay, we're on
really
our way.
Nice.
We have a lot of traveling to do, but that's definitely going to be one of our stops. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. What really an incredible film. Alison watched it again. Some of those films you watch over and over, and this is definitely one of them. We are definitely going to, I'm sure I know the audience enjoyed it incredibly, and we will continue to support it even after this festival, whatever you need from us. But thank you again for joining us and having this great conversation. And we wish you the best of luck with the sequel and the development lab. And we will continue to follow all of the incredible work you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rox Festival. And oh my God, you guys are sisters rocking it. I love it. Thank you. Take over.
We're going to take over, right?